Welcome to the Growth Now movement. I'm your host, Justin Shank. I'm an entrepreneur, speaker, and podcaster who years ago decided to go on a journey on how to grow in all areas of my life. What I found out was it's really a matter of focusing on the 4 pillars of life: business, relationships, spirituality, and wellness. And that's what we do here. We explore how to continuously grow in those areas, all while having a ton of fun doing it. I'm really excited you're on this journey with me. Now let's get to this week's episode. This week, I sit down with Nate May. Nate is the best kept secret of multiple industries. As a dynamic, captivating, and well-spoken thought leader, he has been leading the charge on change, all behind the curtains. He's helped shape the message, the voice, and the brand of some of the most well-known speakers and influencers across multiple industries. But you probably never heard of him, because his true genius is in the way he can help his clients find their unique voice, message, and significance in a world filled with similarities. In this episode, Nate really opens up about his journey and how he has now found himself to be the person who's ready to have a voice and be the person in front of the curtain. And you're going to find out why he needs to be for this world to continue to connect and grow, and for you to find out who you are before you begin to pour into others in the world and make a true impact. This conversation was close to my heart. You guys are going to love it. You'll find out why I've partnered with Nate on a project as we go forward, and you guys are truly going to be inspired. Now, before we get to the episode, I want to ask a favor of you guys. If you can head over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show, I would be eternally grateful. I love reading all the reviews. I read every single one of them, and I thank you guys so much for coming along on this ride and being a part of it. So would love to hear what you think over on iTunes. And now, without further ado, let's get to the episode with my friend, Nate May. Nate, welcome to the show, man.
Oh man, it's Justin. It's my honor, bro. Thanks for inviting me. Man, it's a great way to spend a morning with somebody that I respect and trust, and just your body of work speaks for itself, man. And also, you're a great human, so it's really easy for me to be a part.
Thanks, man. You know, it's funny. We got connected through Brian Boger, and anybody who's listened to this show has been to my virtual events. They've gotten to know Brian, at least on a certain level, and they know he's just such a good dude. And one thing I will say is the good people in my life that I choose to spend time with also tend to make the same options of choosing to spend time with great people. And when I connected with you, it was immediate. Like I was like, yeah, Nate's a good dude. Like I can't wait to get to know him more. And you know, we've been working on some things in the background that people will know about soon, but we've gotten to know each other. And I was like, dude, you got to come on the show. You got to come on the show. You got to share your passion. You got to share your journey. And I'm excited for the world to hear it, man, because you are really, at this point, you've always been the guy behind the curtain for so many incredible people. And now it's time for you to peel that curtain back and step forward and show people the power that you possess. But why don't we start with, who is Nate today? And then we're going to unwrap how you got there.
Well, first, I'm 43. I'm a dedicated dad, single dad of 5 kids, half a month. Divorced a couple years back. She's the love of my life. And, you know, through my own brokenness, through my own pain, through my own shame that you know, came unraveled. But in that process, I had to lose her to find me. I'm not trying to take that from Selena Gomez, but it's a true story. I had to lose her to find parts of me. You know, now I would call myself more of a serial missional entrepreneur. Like I love chasing ROI, return on investment, but I love getting to be a part of projects in this season of my life. I call it second half living. As I said, so I'm not saying I'm not only going to live to 80. If I live longer, great. But I always said, if I live to 80, I lived a good life. So with that being said, I'm just in that second half of life. And I'm trying to continue to surround myself with not necessarily what I want to get or what accolades I want to receive, but, you know, who am I impacting? Who am I doing life with? You know, who am I serving? You know, that word you'll hear a lot from me probably in this conversation is just who. And I love that you asked it that way. Who is Nate May today? Man, I'm in a place where I'm just trying to continue to deal with my brokenness. In the midst of my brokenness, continue to propel forward in my career. But also just, I would say I'm more vulnerable than I've ever been. And I think in a disconnected world, I think the way you connect the human condition is through your vulnerability. And I think in the space I ran in forever, the self-help space, like you see some of that, but not a lot. You see a lot of facades. You see a lot of people manufacture brands. You see a lot of people manufacture realities that aren't necessarily real, but can be perceived real. That's across the board, not just in the self-help space. So I've just chosen, man, I'm an open book, you know, and I'm going to be that way. So hopefully that answers that question well, brother.
Dude, I love that. And this has opened the floodgates to so many different directions, just that brief intro of who you are today. And it's funny because people will hear that and they know the things that I'm passionate about. They know the things that I'm trying to change in the space, as far as that openness and that vulnerability. And this is who I am. Like the greatest compliment that I get from anybody who has either listened to the show or even somebody that has been on the show, then I later connect with them. They go, dude, you're exactly the same person in that conversation that I either listened to or was a part of than you are hanging out with us, over a drink or doing this or whatever. Yeah. And, I think a lot of times, and I've met a lot of people in the space of self-help and business, right? I mean, I'm talking about CEOs of organizations too, where they paint this perfect facade inside the office building, and then they go home and they're a bad husband or a bad father, or they're not connected to whatever, right? And so you see it across the board. And I know that's a big thing for you, is to talk about authenticity and being open and vulnerable. Why is that so important to you? Was it the idea that you saw it like all the falsehoods out there, or was it just something that wasn't innate to you to be like, this is who I am?
Well, I mean, part of what I do is help people, build their brands. And I have a process called M3, which is message, method, monetization. And so I mostly work with thought leaders. So just a little backdrop, I got my start with a guy by the name of John Maxwell back when I was 21 years old.
Small name.
Yeah, just when he was just on the come up, and had a chance to work with that organization. And then then it sold. And then a lot of the guys that were on, the leadership team, we ended up moving on to other different ventures. And John was one of the most authentic human beings I've ever been around. He was a pastor and said, hey, I want to take what I've done in the, the church world, and I want to be able to help leaders with these principles of leadership that transcend wherever you're at in the world. And then I started moving on from there, and you just run into some really, really unique individuals. And it was really hard because I take on some projects because it was good money. But then the reality was like, I start to get to know who somebody is. And then before you know it, I'm building a brand for this individual that really isn't who they are. And one of the statements I always says, you don't brand yourself, you are yourself. So the reality is you have to pull out somebody's authentic voice to get them a true message on the front end. And then that determines the methodology of how they'll go to market with their content from an intellectual property standpoint. And that'll determine how you monetize it. And, a lot of these people out there is like their one goal is what they're trying to get. Not who they're trying to become or who they're trying to reach. It's really like, this is what I'm trying to get. I want a boat. I want a yacht. I want a plane. I get all that. I don't have a problem with people having things. But I'm just a big fan of who before what. If you focus on who before what, you'll have the ability to create impact with your life and not just create income. And one of the things I always say is your gift, talents, and abilities, what you can do will get you to the mountaintop, but who you are is what will keep you there. And we see it all the time in the self-help space. People rise to the top, they get to the top, and then they have they're a one-trick pony. And then from there, they don't have original content. They just got someone to write their book, got someone to build a brand, got someone to leverage their past history or story, and actually ultimately embellish upon that story. Rent cars, rent houses to shoot video things in. And I'm just sick of that. I'm just in a season of life where it's like, if I have to do that to attain some level of success or some level of admiration from other people, man, I'm just not there. I just, and not that I think everybody at the deep part of who they are wants to do great things. But I think, one of the statements we talk about a lot, and, I know you said it, and who were you before the world told you who to be? And it's a big question that I don't think a lot of people answer. And I'm just a product of that too. Pain. I mean, I always say, hey, people always want to talk about love, and love, love moves people, pain binds people. Love moves people, pain binds people. That's just a product of, the human condition. And it's because we live in a world that is broken in a lot of ways. And based on our upbringing, our stories, our history, what we've been through, and how we deal with pain determines like how we're going to, engage the world. So, I mean, that's a big part of, where I'm setting out to be. And from being behind the curtain for so long, it's kind of it's like one of the things I say, I'm the wizard behind the curtain. I'm the guy that's pulling the levers that need to happen for you to succeed as a thought leader, as a speaker, as an author. And it's time for me to kind of come out at this age and just kind of share some of the things I've learned, both the good, the bad, and the ugly, and be real with it. Because I'm just as imperfect as every other human being on the planet. I just embrace my imperfection, and I'm trying to, take the next step to better myself and better those that are around me that I love the most. So,
dude, just so much wisdom in that. And, when you brought up the quote, who were you before the world told you who to be? Right. I love that question because it's going to stop most people in their tracks, even people who think they have it all figured out. Right. It makes you kind of go back and dive into who am I? Like, who am I in this world? Who was I before somebody said I needed to go to college, needed to get the job, needed to have the things, needed to prove something, right? And I found that out the hard way. And it really came from, I was chasing the things that people told me I needed. And then all of a sudden when my mom passed away, it was, it has nothing to do with any of that. Right. Yeah. And I think we get caught up in the things, or the things society says we have to be, because we want that sort of acceptance from the outside world versus ourselves. And so like when we're talking about those things, I'd love for you to elaborate on this idea of like who, not what. Because I think the who is the thing that's missing. People miss who they are. They don't know who they are. They don't know how to discover it. How does somebody begin to go down that path of figuring out who they are and accepting their flaws, accepting their imperfections?
To really embrace that, you have to go back to go forward. If you really want to embrace your authentic self, you have to take a real hard look at your life. People will call this self-awareness, self-discovery, but I mean hard look. I mean, I call this soul work. And when I got divorced in the midst, I can own a failed marriage. I wasn't a good leader. There was no infidelity, nothing like that. I just, was with her since I was, 16 years old. And over time, you set these patterns in place and you start chasing and you forget about who you are, what kind of marriage you're trying to build. And you start chasing all these things the world's telling you have to attain to grow a family, grow a marriage, and grow a life. And what ended up happening is exactly that. I got what I deserved. And so in the midst of that, I just, discovered heartbreak. It was the first time in my life I was able to look back on my life and go like, oh, that's how I landed in that situation. I didn't just land there. It's because of these choices I made about focusing on what instead of who, and not going back to the fact of like, how did this, condition I'm in, I don't call it a cancer, but I believe shame is a cancer. And I believe your past is always in full pursuit of where you're at. And I share this principle all the time, is like, if you're always chasing what, and you're not trying to uncover who and discover who you are and who you need to be, your past is always really close behind. Because when it's up happening, your past is always a pursuit. All you can do is create distance from it. You can create distance from it by mindset, mentality, things you do on a daily basis to ensure that you don't go back to your old self. And so I just, through pain, I had the ability to explore my life. I went on a soul quest. I mean, after my divorce, I didn't date for a year. I made a point to literally get around men that would literally call the best out of me, not console me. Sometimes I needed a hug. Most of the times I needed a kick in the ass. I always say the number one goal I had back then is because I didn't know who I was without her. I didn't, so many times our identity is wrapped up in people and things. That's why what is, our identity is not wrapped up in like the fact that, man, I am more than a conqueror. I can do all things in this life that I set my mind to, that nothing, my past cannot hold me back. My future is not conditioned by what I've been through. My future actually has the ability to be brighter because of what I've been through. And it's all about perspective. And if you haven't read the book, The Obstacle is the Way, it's a great book by Ryan Holiday. And that really helped me settle my emotions. It helped me settle my mindset. And what it got me into is the reality, like, why am I thinking this way? Why in these moments do I, this emotion ratchets up me of frustration, anger. And it's like, I had to go back and figure out, like, just like anything, if there's something you got to dig up at the root, you got to dig it up. You can't just fix the surface. And I think a lot of people get consumed with what, because that fills a temporary void in their life. And the who work of life is tough work. Like it's deep, it's painful, it's incremental. It can, it's not a quick fix. You got to do it in relationship with other people. And so who works hard work. And I think I think we are conditioned now we're conditioned in the world today. Like, it's not so much about the hard work you do. It's the question of how quick can you get where you want to go. And I think it's a very, like I always use example, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. One of my heroes, not the great book. I mean, I've read lots of great books, but that was his life work. When's the last time you met somebody that spent 30 years of their life studying to write a book?
Never.
Studying to leave a legacy with what they wrote. That book's being read, it's like one of the most top sold books of all time. But that's that guy's life work, man. There's people that are 22 years old coming out because they made some money on Bitcoin. And now they're like, literally like, man, I know how to change the world. By the way, you did a great job. I'm proud of you, man. But what you should do is take what you've learned and continue to grow and become more. And I have this concept called 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. In my 20s, man, it was my job to learn. I had to learn. In my 30s, based on what I learned, in my 20s, I needed to make some mistakes. So I had to make them later on in life. And then my 30s, based on I lived that life. In my 40s, man, I would garnish a little bit what I just called expertise. And then in my 40s, that's where I'm at now. I'm taking my expertise and see where I'm going to head with it. And then because usually throughout that season of life, you start to figure out, man, who am I? Who do I want to live my life with? Who do I want to live my life for? Who am I going to connect my life with, forward seeking? Then in your 50s, people don't know this. John Maxwell didn't write his first book till he was, didn't start his company. So it was after 50.
Wow.
He was 50 years old when he literally started his company. And look at the rise that guy has. Now he's the number one leadership expert in the world. Do you think he arrived there at 50? No, we spent literally 50 years as a student and literally then went out and did what he did. And then he literally created a whole new market for leadership development, period.
Yeah.
Zig Ziglar, Kim Blanchard, they rocked it. But John came out and just like with the 21 laws and just shook up the leadership space. So that's some thoughts on that, brother. I kind of went down a rabbit trail there. So
no, I love it. And so it's so funny. I feel like this is me every time I talk to you where I'm like, oh my God, there's so much gold there that I need to go into 10,000 different directions. And so as you kept talking, I'm like, oh, that's a good direction. Oh, that's a good direction. And so that gives some people some insight into how my brain works while I'm interviewing people. People ask me all the time, like, how do you have such great conversations? So there's a little insight. Like my brain is constantly moving.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to need a nap after this conversation. But the reality is, man, you're talking about these young kids who go and they make a ton of money in Bitcoin or whatever, or they land some digital marketing company and they're making, good money for their age. And then they want to turn around and they want to be the guru. They want to be the thing. And there's usually one or two reasons they want to do that. Number one is from clearly the face value of people start following you. You like the recognition, you like the dopamine hit of those likes and those comments and whatever. And usually the second reason is you're not fulfilled by the thing you were chasing, right? That who, not what idea is. You can have all the what's you want in the world. And I'm like you, I champion you to go have all the abundance you want in your life. But what I realized over time is like, you can chase $1 million. Awesome. And I want you to get there. But I guarantee you when you get there, you're going to go, how do I make 10? Right? There's no fulfillment in the what. There's no fulfillment in having 10 cars or the private jet or the whatever. The fulfillment is in helping others. It's in pouring into others. It's taking what we've learned, like you said, over time, right? That lifelong lesson, and going and teaching others, right? And so what was your realization moment? Was it working with John Maxwell at 23 being like, whoa, this is the life? Or was it you going through the divorce and you going through that pain to be like, this is what I'm learning?
When you don't come from much, I mean, I grew up in my mom died when I was, my parents divorced when I was 9. My mom died when I was 11 in my arms, tragic situation. Went through some stuff as a kid that, we don't have to get into here. My dad was a good guy. He was a single dad of 2 guys. He was an iron worker hippie. And, we were low middle class and, my dad made sure we had food on the table, and a great guy, but I didn't come from much. So, then I married someone that came from something. When it came to what they had and, great family, good people. And from early on, like that realization that I was always trying to add up and try to get to that place. And then I landed in an environment like John Maxwell. I went to Bible school, man. I went out of high school, man. When I was 17, I had a spiritual experience. Ended up going to Bible school, became an ordained pastor, realized really quickly I didn't want to be in vocational ministry, landed with a job with John Maxwell and had a chance to be a part of an environment that not only cared about making money, cared about actually having an impact. Like we can create change with what we're doing. That was new for me. A lot of people I saw made money. It wasn't so much missional. It's like they just, man, I'm going to go make some cheddar. And by the way, you said who, not what. I would say it's not what. I'd say who before what. Who before what. Go make your cheddar, boo-boo. Go get your money. Go do your thing. Buy your yachts, your boats. I literally don't care. It doesn't impress me.
Right.
And by the way, when you think about when you look at somebody, what they have, it gets your attention, and that's great. But who is what really binds you to who that person is? It's who that person is what will keep you around in their life a long time. And so for me, what was the crippling point for me was literally, as life grew, I kept carrying my past with me. And then finally something had to break. And the breaking point for me is not that there wasn't things along the way. Man, I made money, lost money, made money in self-help, made money in real estate, made money in telecom, did all these things. For me, the buckling point is when I left my marriage, I left with golf clubs, a suitcase, and a car. And so it's sad that I had to literally land at that place to really uncover and go like, well, here's the deal. Either this second half of my life As a single dad of 5 kids and they're 18, 15 days a month, they have joint physical custody. I'm a dedicated dad more than anything. I run a company. I take care of, I got kids out there right now doing schoolwork that are quarantined.
Where do you find the time, man? 5 kids. That's a whole nother conversation.
You make time. You make time for who's important. If I was just chasing what, guess what? They wouldn't be my priority. But those kids are my priority. They are the who in my life. They're the driving focal points. And people say that, but show me what you do on a daily basis. Show me what that looks like, and I'll tell you what drives you. Yeah. And the reality is, when you look at the whole concept of who before what, I don't want anybody to ever think like it's bad to have what. It's bad to have ambition or bad to have goals. To me, it's like, what's the underlying reality of what you're trying to accomplish? Because the reality is, if you chase what, you have a good shot of finding significance. If a talented person, you're going to find success. You're going to find it. If you chase what, you'll find success. But very rarely you're going to stumble into significance. If you chase who you're becoming and who you are, you will literally find significance, and by chance you'll stumble into success. And that's the big difference. Is like, go be successful, but at the end of the day, if you had one life to live, one day left to live, it's like, what are you going to do? Guarantee it's not what, it's who. So I think mine was a breaking point, and we all have them. The question is, we have those breaking points in life. I know I've heard your story. There's, when you lost your mom, there's just breaking points. The question is, what do you do with those breaking points? And the reality is, you have really only 2 options, in my opinion. And this is the Brian Boger thing. Is like, either you embrace the current moment and the pain you're suffering at that moment, and you actually do something with it to avoid long-term suffering. The problem is, most people with pain, we either deflect, we minimize, or we compartmentalize. And I did that my whole life. Hey, by the way, I had a Goodwill Hunting moment. And here's another big breaking point. Again, I've never shared this, I don't think, publicly, but I'm going to share it. And I'm there. I'm ready to do that now. So my marriage is falling apart. We did one last ditch effort to go to these psychologists up in the mountains, and it was just her and I, and it's like a 3-day experience. And they try to fix your marriage. You do all this paperwork before. Man, I went through all kinds of counseling growing up based on what I went through. But at this point, I'm driving up there, and we're not even looking at each other the whole ride up. I'm literally wasn't going to go. It's at breaking point, right? Before this even happened. So I get up to this lodge, and if I get emotional here, I apologize. I don't apologize, actually. It's okay. Vulnerability is good. So I call it my Goodwill Hunting moment. Remember when you're when Matt Damon's sitting there with Robin Williams, and Robin, it's like their last session, and Robin Williams holding his file, and he looks at his file, and he's like this. He goes, and Matt Damon's he's like, "This ain't your fault." And the file is his past, all the things that kid had went through. And he kept looking at Matt Damon, and literally, I think it was 7 times, he says, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault." Then you can tell, Matt Damon's getting uncomfortable. He's like, "Don't do this to me. Don't do this. It's not your fault." Then he moves closer. Robin Williams moves closer to him. And finally he says, "No, look at me, son. It's not your fault." Matt Damon crumbles. And it was a breaking moment. And the hard part is, a lot of people will have moments that can break them for the better, but they choose not to be broken. They choose to muscle through. They choose to just it's going to be okay. No, minimize the pain. Other people had it worse. Deflected. Hey, it's not that big of a deal. Compartmentalize it. And they're like, we'll stack that away for another day. I got to keep trucking through. I got to keep riding through. I got to pound through life.
Right.
And the reality is, we weren't built that way. Whether you believe you come from the ooh to the goo to you, I don't care. Evolution or creation, the way we're wired up is we're not built. True PTSD, you know what it is? I got diagnosed with it. True PTSD was this. It's literally when you go through trauma in your past, your brain, the biology of it, the neurology of it, your brain literally physically rewires itself. Isn't that amazing? That crazy. To help you cope with pain.
It's crazy.
And so coming out of that is crazy. So I go up to this retreat center, and I'm with these people. And so we're having our second session, and I'm sitting in a room there, the 2 counselors across here. It's a husband and a wife. And then me and my ex are here. And we're not sitting close, we're sitting here. And he literally is reading the notes of my file. And he's like, "Man, Nate, your past was traumatic. You've been through a lot." I said, "Yeah, here we go, classic minimalization. You know what? It was tough, but man, other people have it harder. Other people had it worse. I did have clothes on my back. I did have this. I had, friends that, rada, you go through all that." Then he kept going. "Man, no, Nate, I don't think you get it. Your past was traumatic." I go, "Okay, man, I get it. I've been down this road. It's traumatic. I got it. What are you going to do to fix this marriage here? Why are you going to help us?" Yeah. So now I'm deflecting. I go away from the pain and I deflect like, no, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about this. This is what's broken is our marriage. I'm not realizing this at all. Right. And so then he goes to next, he goes, Nate, it's your past is traumatic. I said, all right. Then we'll talk about that later. Let's get on to some compartmentalization. I mean, I literally went through the myriad of how you don't deal with pain in one setting.
Right. Yeah.
And I had to look back on this to really get to the point. But then he goes, well, Nate, you're not getting my point, so I'm going to make a point for you. You have 5 amazing kids. You have to choose one of your kids to go live your life between the ages of 0 and 13. Which one do you choose? I was like, I'm like, no, screw that, man. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. That's a dumb, he's like, no, Nate, you have to choose. Then he asked me this other question that was crazy. He says, Nate, I know you believe, you're spiritual. Like, if God was in this room, where's God at right now? I said, he's sitting across from me, talking to me like you. He said that. He asked the question. That really was it. It's like, okay. And he says, all right, Nate, which kid do you choose? He kept going, pounding it. And he says, fine, I'll choose for you. I have 4 daughters and 1 son. He said, I'm going to choose your son. And I'm like, now my heart is pounding. I'm getting tense. I'm tensing up. I'm experiencing things I haven't experienced. I've never thought about it this way. And then he literally goes, what would you do to ensure that wouldn't happen to your son? I said, man, you don't want to know what I would do to ensure that wouldn't happen to my son. Then he goes like this. Why the hell was it okay for you? Oh, it just gave me a different lens. And he literally steps out of his chair. I start to cry. And he come over and he put his arm on his shoulder. He says, man, God's not over there. He's always been right with you. And man, I literally crumbled to a ball in the middle of the floor and sobbed like I've never sobbed before. And that was a breaking point. It was finally where someone got in my heart and my head at the same time. They moved beyond my intellect and he found a way to make that 18-inch journey from my head to my heart to who I really was and what I was, not what I was going through, but who was coming out of this situation. What are you going to be after this? Who are you going to be after this? And that was a huge breaking point for me. And it was, it was my ex's revelation of like, this is why you dealt like this and treated me like this and communicated like this for all these years. It was her release point to go like, now I know. And for me, it was my point of like, now my work begins. And I went on a journey, man. And I hate that that was the journey, but that's what it was, man. It was and I would encourage anybody to listen to this. When pain rears its ugly head, whether it's something you chose or you didn't choose, lean in. Don't lean away. The greatest book that's in you, the greatest message you have to share with others, the greatest thing that you'll be able to give the world is not your highs, not how you succeeded. The greatest wins you're going to give is how you got out of your greatest pain, how you overcome, and then what did you do with that? Who did you serve with that? Who did you help with that? And so I encourage you all just to lean in. Don't lean away. And it's painful. People don't do it because it was the most brutal year of my life. For the first 3 months, I stayed with a friend and back and forth with my kids. And man, that guy literally committed that. He literally sometimes would come into my room and he would literally take my feet and put them to the floor. And he would say this statement. It's like, just get one to the floor, man. Just get one to the floor. And I did it. And I think a lot of us go through deep pain, but sometimes you're not. And I did it, man. I just went through the pain. I'm still on the journey, man. And my cancer was shame. It was toxic shame. It was, Brene Brown speaks on this. I mean, if you're dealing with the feeling that you're not enough, and here's what I would say. A lot of the times we think we feel guilty about our actions. There's a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says this, you've done something wrong. Shame says you are wrong. You're inherently wrong. And so many people deal with that. We think people are dealing with guilt because of things they've done. Really know what they're dealing with, the fact that they don't feel they're good enough. They don't feel like they deserve a good life. They don't feel they're worthy of one. They don't feel that's like it's inherently deep in the core of them. It's not like just the thought. It's in the core of them. It drives their actions. It drives their emotions. I'll give you an example of marriage. If you're married watching this, if you're having an argument or a conversation with your wife and she says this, I worked a lot, worked hard. And she would call me and it'd be like 5:30. She's like, are you coming home? And I'm like, I'm working. Now that I look back, I know what the response was from. I'm like, I'm working. And she's like, well, just come home. And I'm like, you know what? By the way, quit calling me at 5:30. I'm working to provide for this family. Man, I'm a great husband. I'm a great father. I'm saying all these things. I'm literally, my perception of what she's saying to me is this, you're not good enough. Right. You're not doing enough. In reality, you know what she was saying? We miss you. We want you home. She's a good woman. She's a great woman. I'll never say a bad word about her. And so that being said, it's like, man, that's what shame and the whole concept of just pursuing what and not tackling who. And so I hope that makes sense. That's a lot to carry, but
thank you so much for sharing that, because it's such a powerful thing, right? To be able to face that in the proper way, right? And so, like, for me, in a very, not a very similar way, but a similar kind of path and outcome, was after my mom passed away, I got blackout drunk for 3 months straight, like 6-7 nights a week, blackout drunk. And I'd wake up and be like, what happened last night? Kind of drunk. And I had at the time I had a spiritual and relationship coach, because I thought my damage was I wasn't good enough for relationships, right? I was just like, I wasn't, again, that shame, like I'm not good enough. And I was working with her, but at the same time I would just go numb the pain. And so the one day she calls me and she goes, what are you doing tonight? And I said, I'm going out with some buddies. And she goes, no, you're not. You're going to sit and you're going to feel this shit. And that night I sat and felt all the emotions, right? All of it. And it was the worst night of my life, but I woke up the next day and there was this great weight lifted off my shoulders. That's when the work began. I then went on to write a letter to my mom, telling her about my anger, telling her, now obviously she was dead at this point, but wrote a letter to my mom, telling her about my anger, telling her about the things I loved, telling her about the things I hated, telling her all these things. And I lit it on fire, right? Because that idea of like, I'm letting this go. I then went on to write a letter to myself of the things that I was forgiving myself of, the things that I will no longer hold on to. And those little actions of acknowledging and letting go are massive, right? Like obviously the letting go takes some time, but it's a great first step to be able to write it down, because there's a great power in writing it down and setting it on fire and saying, I'm letting this go. And we actually did at the retreat this last weekend, we did a letter ceremony where everybody did this, right? They wrote a letter to themselves and set it on fire. And I mean, it was transformational. Like you could literally, I shit you not, they lit this thing on fire from the candle that we had. And it literally, when they were walking away, they looked 20 pounds lighter. Like just in that moment, in that action of like letting it go. And that's such a powerful thing to share. Because
we need more. I mean, I want to break the stigma for men that are watching this, man. By the way, don't test me. I'm a fucking Viking. I mean, you want to come out and mess with somebody I loved? I mean, I grew up, Chubb, man. I've been, stabbed. I grew up rough. So don't test me. But by the way, I can carry that same lion mentality. But at the same time, man, I think we have to lean into our vulnerability. Yeah. And it's like, and I think when we do that, it makes us stronger in every aspect of our life. But there's a stigma for men that they can't be vulnerable because it shows that they're not strong. But in reality, vulnerability become your greatest strength, and it comes out in different ways. But really, it's our job to, and I always tell people this, like when I work with people outside of what I do for speakers and authors, I always tell them this, like, I don't know if you want to go unpack this with me. And I have people, I don't charge for this, like men that are struggling with shame or pain and they really want to get serious, but I'm like, set a time, let's talk. And I always ask for permission. I said, can I be a heart surgeon for you? Like, yeah, but I'm a heart surgeon without a blade. I said, I'm going to reach my hand down your throat. I'm going to rip out your heart. I'm going to show it what it is for what it really is. Then we're going to work on it together. And when we're done, I'm going to put it back in and you'll be a better man. I'm a heart surgeon without a blade. And that's one of my passions in life. There's no ROI on the head. That's just an ROI and return on mission. Because the more men I feel actually that will go back in order they can move forward healthy, the more marriages will be healed. We'll tackle the fatherless generation that we've been giving for generations now. Like we gotta, and that's just because men are so wound up in shame and so wound up in insecurity. And we always been taught just to keep a facade. I just believe you can have it all. I think you can be a man in a bar that somebody looks at and says, like, I ain't crossing that, dude. Then they could be that man when they finally come over and sit down next to you, man. You can be that guy that puts your arm around and says, hey, man, you're going to be all right. You'll get through this. I just want to break that facade a little bit for you men that are listening. It's like, that's important that you can break that down and be that man to your wife that literally will sit up late at night and talk to her and listen to her feelings and share yours. Be that guy that, will sit there and listen to your kids and hear about their pain and let them embrace it and show them how to get through it. Don't minimize their pain. Don't tell them not to feel. Teach them how to feel. Don't tell people not to feel. Teach them how to feel. So
Yeah,
And
dude, that's so powerful, man. Because of this podcast, I've had the opportunity to interview some of the world's most successful people, however you want to define success. So my question for you is a two-parter. First part is, what's your definition of success? And the second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Well, success is always defined for me about what I have. So I want a good life. I want nice things. I like a nice watch. I do like I got 5 kids, so I don't really get nice cars yet. To me, what I do on a daily basis, I work on a method called OGSM. People write their goals down all the time. It's an age-old method, Procter & Gamble model, objective, goal, strategy, metric. The way my mind sets is like not just a goal. It's like, what's my objective for this goal? A lot of people just write goals down. Let's say my objective is like, I'm launching a podcast. My objective is I would like to reach, thousands of men's lives and help them turn the corner on their pain, because I think who before what's important. That's my objective. What are my goals? I'd like to impact, men between the ages of this. Like I set goals. Then the strategy is like, how am I going to do that? I'm going to build a list. I'm going to do this. And then what's my metric? How do I measure it? So that's something I do on a consistent basis. I'm not a goal setter. A bad statement. I don't set goals traditionally, like the Grant Cardone method. Like I write my goals 2 times a day. Nah, man. It's not how I work. And maybe because part of it, I'm creative. Like I'm a creative a little bit. I write a lot. My mind's on ideation. And creatives, I can't be put in a box. You try to block out my calendar every day to do X, X, and X. I would run myself off a bridge just for that main reason. I can't.
You have to tie the emotion to that goal.
Yeah. Don't fence me in. Like my goals have to have ambitions behind them, not just what but that's my success mentality, which is, hey, I got to do these things to get what I want, to have this kind of income, to build this kind of life for my family, to set aside this. I got 4 weddings coming, 5 colleges. Like, guys, there's not an option for me to not make money. Yeah. I got to go get my cheddar, boo. And I go get it. I do. So that's one thing I do for success is I do that. 2, I have a real, I believe the greatest asset we have in life is not the money in our bank account, not the things we have, but the circles I'm connected to. So I have a real small circle of men that on a daily basis, actually they're texting me now, and we just on a daily basis, we check in. Like, and let me say, okay, 1, we always say, where's your heart at? You doing good? How can I help you there? 2, how's business going? Man, are you thriving? Can I help with anything? And last but not least, we always the first one, we always talk about the heart, then we talk about business. And the last one, we say, what are you doing for fun? Like, what are you doing for fun? Like, what are you doing to unwind? Because I feel so many people are so wound up. And this is if you want a successful marriage after your second half of living, you've been through a divorce or a broken relationship, don't jump into another one. Because here's the problem. Before you ever wind up again in life and anything after something, you have to first unwind. If you want to wind up, you have to unwind something first. So I have men like that in my life. So that's 2. So the OGSM model 2 is men in my life. And then 3 outside of that is I continually network. I'm always trying to meet new people and I'm always trying to learn from those people. I believe that a lot of people think they've mastered something. I just continue to believe I'm just a student on a consistent, I'm just a mere student. I'm 43 years old. I'm the master of nothing yet. I'm just a student. And so those are the 3 things I focus on with success.
I love it, man. I love it. So I always wrap up every single interview with the same question, but before we get there, let's get to the good stuff. How do people find you? Where do they go to get more information? What's all that stuff?
It's a great question, man. You guys can follow me on Instagram. You'd have to request it. It's still a private account. But I will.
The man behind the curtain.
Yeah, at Nathan J. May. If you ever want to, you can. Yeah, that's probably the best. Our Facebook, you find me at Nathan May. So at Nathan J. May. There's more to come. A thing you'll be coming out soon. You'll see a website coming out called IamNoLimits.com. I'm building that now. It's something me and Brian Bogert are putting together. You guys will be really cool about the curation of the conversation that we're doing is around who before what. We're going to be taking deep dives and helping people really understand how they unpack who they are and how that's going to impact their life moving forward. So write that down. Remember the IamNoLimits.com. That'll be up here shortly, but at Nathan J. May. So I wish I had more for you, brother, but I'm not a great
dude. It was so funny as I was saying it. I'm like, this is the best because there's nowhere there. Like, obviously here's what I would recommend to everybody listening. Find a way to get in Nate's sphere. Find a way to get into his life. I found a way without social media, right? So find a way because this guy's going to be changing the world. We're working on something really exciting together as well, which you should hear about here, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Something that I haven't been this excited about something in a really, really long time. And so working with just some incredible human beings to get that put out there. And so keep an eye out for that as well. Now, obviously, like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. That is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
That's a great question. My biggest moment of growth, I would say when COVID hit. And let me give you context. I have a couple more minutes. I'm in a couple minutes here. So let me give you context. I say that because for the first year of our divorce, we shared the family home, not together. She'd leave for 15 days. Then I'd stay for 15 days. She'd come back. I'd leave for 15 days. And at that time, I knew I couldn't be alone. I've never been alone my whole life. I always stayed with someone, lived with someone all the way through, high school, and then literally got married young, married when I was 20, just always lived with somebody, whether roommate or whatever. So I literally would go stay with friends, like on their couches with buddies. I just knew every night I knew I wasn't alone. I was somebody I could talk to, stay with families that their kids call me Unc or, all that stuff. I traveled the country. I'd go to Montana and climb mountains. I'd go put my feet in the ocean, in the Pacific. I'd do things that make my soul come alive. And then I finally got up the courage to literally get an apartment. And I was like, my next step was like, before I get a home, I need a transitional place where it's like, it's not overwhelming for me. I need to get something simple. And when I did that, I got that on March 7th of last year. So I'm thinking like, man, this is going to be awesome. It's going to be cool. It's like a family condominium complex where my kids can come swim. I mean, it's like a resort, the best way to put it. It's like we walk up 3 steps and my kids are at on a playground that's built for families. It's got a pool, game room, everything. So my kids, when they come here, I don't see them. They just go play outside with a bunch of other kids. And I needed that if I'm going to try to build a business and do what I do in the summer and all that. And then COVID hit. So it was a week later. I mean, literally 4 days later, 5 days, whatever it was. I remember the date exactly. And then literally I was utterly alone. Couldn't go nowhere, couldn't do nothing. And I thought I did some work the first year. The last year for COVID, from March to March of this year, man, I've had some low moments because of the concept of just and what I had to get to. So that was the biggest growth moment because I had to embrace this. I can deal with loneliness, but I had to realize I was never alone. I learned how to manage loneliness by understanding I was never alone. I was a phone call away from people that wanted to serve and help me in my life. And I'd encourage you, in the moment of that growth, is the first time in my life that I learned how to ask for help. I learned how to ask, like, man, can you help me with this? Do you mind talking to me on the phone? Will you do a Zoom? By the way, I know COVID's here, but you mind if you've cleaned your hands, would you come over for a little bit and watch it? I learned to ask for help. And so that was the biggest growth moment too, of like just being utterly alone. But I got through that and I'm on the other side of that now.
That's awesome. And I'll say this, I was the exact opposite. I loved being alone. I loved my alone time. I lived by myself in an apartment for years. And then COVID hit. And 2 months after COVID, I moved in with my girlfriend and 2 children who weren't in school. And I was never alone.
Yeah, never.
Ever. And so I did the opposite. With that being said, I will also say that people who listen to my podcast religiously know whenever I go, that it was really good information. And I probably more in this episode than I have in a really, really long time, man. So thank you so much for coming on and opening your heart and sharing your journey and your story on the show. You will be back on. That's a given. You're going to be back on in the future, man.
Thanks for what you do.
But yeah, dude, thank you so much. This was great. I appreciate you guys. Go find him, find a way to be in his sphere, whatever that looks like. I don't know, but go figure that out. And dude, thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.